use some clay as air dry clay as a make and take. Clay is made of rocks and water. With the tools we have in front of us, we have a piece of clay, some canvas, some paint, preferably some dark paint. I have a very simple stencil. I'm using this stencil for viewing purposes so you can see it a little easier. You will probably have other detailed stencils you can use. There's also some popsicle sticks and some beads and a tennis ball. Now to get the shape I want, what I want to do is kind of prepare it for my stencil. So I want to stretch it out. My hands are cupped. I can round it out. It's somewhat of a potato shape. I'm going to take my tennis ball just like a hammer and a rolling pin together. I'm going to tap it and then I stretch it out. And of course, if anything gets in the clay, you can always pick it out. What we're going to do is trying to prepare the clay as evenly as I can for my stencil. I'm keeping it on the canvas. Canvas is good to keep it from sticking. I can always pull it up. When you dry clay, it's good to dry clay on something that will absorb water. Drying it on a plastic tablecloth, it will dry unevenly sometimes and crack the bottom. If we set it on top of cardboard, it keeps it drying evenly so the water is absorbed in the cardboard. You can use drywall. You can also use wood. You can use a flower pot tray, anything that will absorb water. So I'm stretching the clay out, getting it ready as large as I need. I'm putting pressure and I'm rolling it. Now you can use both hands, you can use one hand, you can interlock your fingers, you can switch back and forth, any of the ways that you want that helps. The main thing is we're stretching the clay out, getting it nice and even to prepare it for a stencil. Now I'm going to set aside my tennis ball. The stencil goes probably right in the middle. I'm going to pick up my tennis ball and I'm actually going to roll the stencil into the clay. Now the reason I do this is I want to lock the stencil in place. Whenever I use some paint, the paint will only go into the area of the exposed clay. So now I can get the shape of my dinosaur. I'm going to take some contrasting paint, some black paint, and you want to make sure if your brush is stiff, you can run it under water and you have a really soft brush. So I'm going to use a soft brush instead of a stiff brush. You want it to be nice and soft. Gently paint whatever color you're using, very softly over your stencil, not a lot of pressure. You don't want to pull, you want to kind of dab the paint on there. It can go quite a bit over your stencil. The main thing is we're covering the whole thing. And I'm stretching it out, covering the whole piece, just like this. Putting the paintbrush down. Now I can pull the stencil up, and what I have is the design of the stencil. Now if the clay cracks, you can always take a tool and cut it, or it's easy to repair clay by pulling it together and smoothing it with your finger. Clay is very forgiving and you can do lots of things to repair it. The more you hold it and the longer it is in the air, it will dry out. Now what I can do is with my tools or my decorations, I can use beads around it to put lots of detail into the clay if I like. Now I can get quite detailed with it. I can go all around it with decorations. I can even take some of these beads and deliberately place them, certain colors, maybe for an eye right here. So now I have the eye of the dinosaur. I can also use popsicle sticks, and using these are pretty wide. What we want to do is make sure they fully get stuck down into the clay, and then I'm going to pull them out. And what it does is it gives me some texture. Now maybe this is some ground. I can even use a popsicle stick and I can draw some ground at the bottom. Trying to just stick a popsicle stick in there and expecting it to stay, it's not going to work. What you can do is you can draw with it. You can press it in for some imprints. worked on a stencil, now we're doing a pinch pot. So a pinch pot, we're getting a small piece of clay. It's smaller than your tennis ball. What we want to do is roll it in our hands, make it fairly round. Remember, the longer we roll it, the drier it gets. To do a pinch pot, we hold it with one hand, and we're going to dig in with our thumb tip, not our thumb print, our thumb tip, going almost to the bottom. And then if there's any breaks in it, you can always smooth it out. Now to feel when to stop, your thumb will almost break through. Now if it does break through, like this, pull it out, you can smooth the bottom piece out, and it's easily fixed. You don't have to smash it and start over. Starting over with a clay simply dries it out more and makes it more frustrating. So we keep our thumb at the bottom, we keep our fingers straight, and we're pinching slowly in a circle, opening up the pinch pot. Now again, if any part of it breaks, we can always smooth it out. So this is a pinch pot right here. I've opened it up. This can become anything. We can do a little cup out of the clay. It's really just practicing to do it. Now, what I'm going to do with this piece is I'm making a turtle. So the next piece of clay, that becomes a turtle shell. This becomes the base. So I've stretched it out with a tennis ball, making it nice and big. And if you notice, beside me is a cup of water. The water helps the clay to stick. So we're using that to help it stick. So I'm stretching it out on the canvas. If I don't have enough clay, I'm going to dip into my bag. Notice I have the bag of clay covered up. You don't want to leave clay out you're not using, otherwise it just simply dries out. The air will dry out the clay. Your hands dry out the clay, the air dries the clay. It just dries out quickly. So I want the pinch pot to be smaller than the slab. So I've smashed it, I've made a pinch pot, I've made a slab. Now I do a coil. So I'm going to stretch out the clay, a little piece of clay about as wide as my pinky finger. Put a little water on it. Probably from end to end, I'm going to crisscross, and you'll see why. This becomes the legs of our turtle. So I'm going from end to end, crisscrossing just like this, sticking it down, squishing it enough that it's going to stick. So I don't want to set it on there. I have to dip it, squish it, and it's good to go. Now we're going to work on the head. Now the neck and the head are thick. They are not thin pieces of clay. Turtles have sturdy necks. So this can become the neck and the head. Dip it in the water. I'm going to stick half of it down, bend it up, bend it out. So it's kind of like this. Keep my pinch pot, and then I do a tail. Now when I do the tail, I roll only on one side. So it's a little piece of clay, thinning it out, dip it in the water, stick it on, make sure it stays on the slab. Your slab will help protect the piece from breaking. It holds it together longer. Use lots of water around the lip of your pinch pot, which is the very top, the lip of your pinch pot. Segment of make and take clay. So again, we are using natural clay made of rocks and water. This clay that we're using can be decorated with beads. We can use some popsicle sticks for different designs, and then we can also use stencils. So I have a small piece of clay. I'm going to roll it in my hands. I'm going to use my tennis ball, and I have the water beside me. So again, I roll my slab. Now this time, it is simply about making some designs. This is purely just a little pendulum. that we're making. So I can roll a coil. Coils can crack easily the longer we hold them in our hands. So don't bend it too much, just be careful. So now what I can do is I can roll this piece of clay up. Thankfully this clay is very plastic and it bends easily. So here's a swirl. This is one design that's simple to make, a snail. I can add that to the clay, I can squish it down just a little bit, and I'm going to break another piece off. I roll this out, I can make a snake design. I go back and forth, just like this. A snake design, add some water, maybe put it beside it, and then I can do all kinds of other designs. I can roll a piece of clay out, I can connect the edges together, and I pinch them, and then I pinch the bottom, and I have a heart. So I'm adding some water, now I have a heart. You can play around with all kinds of designs and ideas. Again, you can use some paint. This paint happens to be black. There may be a few other colors that you can use with it when you decorate, and then you can also use some beads. Now the beads, again, are great for adding different designs.